Chapter 4, Addie, Thursday, September 27th, 7:30 p.m. I should be doing homework before Jake stops by, but instead I'm sitting at the vanity in my bedroom, pressing fingers to the skin at my hairline. The tenderness on my left temple feels as though it's going to turn into one of those horrible oversized pimples I get every few months or so. Whenever I have one, I know it's all anyone can see. I'll have to wear my hair down for a while, which is how Jake likes it anyway. My hair is the only thing I feel 100% confident about all the time. I was at Glenn's dinner last week with my girlfriends, sitting next to Keely across from the big mirror, and she reached over and ran a hand through my hair while grinning at her reflections. "Can we please trade, just for a week?" she said. I smiled at her, but wished I were sitting on the other side of the table. I hate seeing Keely and me side by side. She's so beautiful and tawny skin and long eyelashes and Angelina Jolie lips. She's the lead character in a movie, and I'm the generic best friend who names you forget before the credits even start rolling. The doorbell rings, but I know better than to expect Jake upstairs right away. Mom's going to capture him for at least 10 minutes. She can't hear enough about the Simon situation, and she'd talk about today's meeting with Officer Budapest all night if I let her. I separate my hair into sections and run a brush along each length. My mind keeps going back to Simon. He'd been a constant presence around our group since freshman year, but he was never one of us. He had only one real friend, a sort of goth girl named Janae. I used to think they were together until Simon started asking out all my friends. Of course, none of them ever said yes, although last year before she started dating Cooper, Keely got super drunk at a party and let Simon kiss her for 5 minutes in a closet. It took her ages to shake him after that. I'm not sure what Simon was thinking, to be honest. Keely is one type, jock. He should have gone for someone like Bronwyn. She's cute enough, in a quiet kind of way, with interesting gray eyes and hair that would probably look great if she ever wore it down. Plus, she and Simon must have tripped over each other in honors classes all the time, except I got the impression today that Bronwyn didn't like Simon much, or at all. When Officer Budapest talked about how Simon died, Bronwyn looked, I don't know, not sad. A knock sounds at the door, and I watch it as it opens in the mirror. I keep brushing my hair as Jake comes in. He pulls off his sneakers and flops on my bed with exaggerated exhaustion, arms splayed at his sides. "Your mom's wrung me dry, Ads. I've never met anyone who can ask the same question in so many ways." "Tell me about it," I say, getting up to join him. He puts an arm around me, and I curl up into his side, my head on his shoulder and my hand on his chest. We know exactly how to fit together, and are relaxed for the first time since I got called into Principal Gupta's office. I trail my fingers along his bicep. Jake's not as defined as Cooper, who's practically a superhero with all of his professional level working out he does, but to me he's the perfect balance of muscular and lean, and he's fast, the best running back Bayview High has seen in years. There's not the same feeding frenzy around him as Cooper, but a few colleges are interested, and he's got a good shot at a scholarship. "Mrs. Keller called me," Jake says. My hand halts its progress up his arm, and I stare at the crisp blue cotton of his t-shirt. "Simon's mother? Why?" "She asked if I'd be a pallbearer at the funeral." "It's gonna be Sunday," Jake says, his shoulders lifting in a shrug. I told her sure. Can't really say no, can I? I forget sometimes that Simon and Jake used to be friends in grade school and middle school before Jake turned into a jock and Simon turned into whatever he was. Freshman year, Jake made the varsity football team and started hanging out with Cooper, who was already a Bayview legend after almost pitching his middle school team to the Little League World Series. By sophomore year, the two of them were basically the kings of our class, and Simon was just some weird guy Jake used to know. I half think Simon started about that to impress Jake. Simon found out one of Jake's football rivals was behind the anonymous sexting harassment of a bunch of junior girls and posted it on this app called After School. It got tons of attention for a couple weeks, and so did Simon. That might have been the first time anyone at Bayview noticed him. Jake probably patted him on the back once and forgot about it, and Simon moved on to bigger and better things by building his own app. Gossip as a public service doesn't go very far, so Simon started posting things a lot pettier and more personal than the sexing scandal. Nobody thought he was a hero anymore, but by then they were getting scared of him, and I guess for Simon that was almost as good. Jake usually defended Simon, though, when our friends got down on him for about that. "It's not like he's lying," he'd point out. "Stop doing his sneaky shit and it won't be a problem." Jake can be pretty black and white in his thinking sometimes, easy when you never make a mistake. "We're still headed for the beach tomorrow night, if that's okay," he tells me now, winding my hair around his fingers. He says it's like it's up to me, but we both know Jake's in charge of our social life. "Of course," I murmur. "Who's going?" "Don't say TJ. Cooper and Keely are supposed to, although she's not sure he's up for it. Lewis and Olivia, Vanessa, Tyler, Noah, Sarah." "Don't say TJ. And TJ. Arg. I'm not sure if it's my imagination or if TJ, who used to be on the outskirts of our friend group as the new kid, has started working his way into the center right when I wish he'd disappear altogether. "Great," I say blandly, reaching up and kissing Jake's jawline. It's the time of the day when it's a little scratchy, which is new this year. Adelaide, my mother's voice floats up the stairs. "We're headed out." She and Justin go somewhere downtown almost every night, usually restaurants but sometimes clubs. Justin's only 30 and is still into that whole scene. My mother enjoys it almost as much, especially when people mistake her for being Justin's age. "Okay," I call, and the door slams. After a minute, Jake leans down to kiss me, his hand sliding under my shirt. A lot of people think Jake and I have been sleeping together since freshman year, but that's not true. He wanted to wait until after junior prom. It was a big deal. Jake rented a fancy hotel room that he filled with candles and flowers and bought me amazing lingerie from Victoria's Secret. I wouldn't have minded something a little more spontaneous, I guess, but I know I'm beyond lucky to have a boyfriend who cares enough to plan every last detail. "Is this okay?" Jake's eyes scan on my face. "Or would you rather just hang out?" His brows rise like it's a real question, but his hand keeps inching lower. I never turn Jake down. It's like my mother said when she first took me to get birth control. If you say no too much, pretty soon someone else will say yes. Anyway, I want it as much as he does. I live for these moments of closeness with Jake. I'd crawl inside of him if I could. "More than okay," I say, and pull him on top of me. Nate, Thursday, September 27th, 8 p.m. I live in that house. The one people drive past and say, "I can't believe someone actually lives here." We do, although living might be a stretch. I'm gone as much as possible, and my dad's half dead. Our house is on the far edge of Bayview, the kind of shitty ranch rich people buy to tear down. Small and ugly, with only one window in front. The chimney's been crumbling since I was 10. 7 years later, everything else is joining in. The paint's peeling, shutters are hanging off, the concrete steps in front are cracked wide open. The yard's just as bad. The grass is almost knee-high and yellow after the summer drought. I used to mow it sometimes until it hit me that yard work is a waste of time that never ends. My father's passed out on the couch when I get inside, an empty bottle on Seagram's in front of him. Dad considers it a stroke of luck that he fell off a ladder during a roofing job a few years ago while he was still a functioning alcoholic. He got a workman's comp settlement and wound up disabled enough to collect Social Security, which is like winning the lottery for a guy like him. Now he can drink without interruption while the check rolls in. The money's not much, though. I like having cable, keeping my bike on the road, and occasionally eating more than mac and cheese, which is how I come to my part-time job, and why I spent 4 hours after school today distributing plastic bags full of painkillers around San Diego County. Obviously not something I should be doing, especially since I was picked up for dealing weed over the summer and I'm on probation. but nothing else pays as well and takes so little effort. I head for the kitchen, open the refrigerator door, and pull out some leftover Chinese. There's a picture curling under a magnet, cracked like a big broken window. My dad, my mother, and me when I was 11, right before she took off. She was bipolar and not great about taking her meds, so it's not as though I had some fantastic childhood while she was around. My earliest memory is her dropping a plate, then sitting on the floor in the middle of the pieces, crying her eyes out. Once I got off the bus, to her throwing all of our stuff out the window. Lots of times she'd curl up in the corner of her bed and not move for days. Her manic phases were a trip, though. For my 8th birthday, she took me to a department store, handed me a cart, and told me to fill it with whatever I wanted. When I was 9 and into reptiles, she surprised me with setting up a terrarium in the living room with a bearded dragon. We call it Stan, after Stan Lee, and I still have it. Those things live forever. My father didn't drink as much then, so between the two of them, they managed to get me to school and sports. Then my mother went totally off her meds and started getting into other mind-altering substances. Yeah, I'm the whole asshole who deals drugs after they wrecked his mother. But to be clear, I don't sell anything except weed and painkillers. My mother would have been fine if she'd stayed away from cocaine. For a while, she came back every few months or so, then once a year. The last time I saw her was when I was 14 and my dad started falling apart. She kept talking about this farm commune that she'd moved to in Oregon and how great it was, that she'd take me and I could go to school there with all the hippie kids and grow organic berries or whatever the hell they did. She bought me a giant ice cream sundae at Glenn's Diner like I was 8 years old, and it told me all about it. You'll love it, Nathaniel. Everyone is so accepting. Nobody labels you the way they do here. It sounded like bullshit even then, but better than Bayview. So I packed a bag and put Stan in his carrier and waited for her on our front steps. I must have sat there half the night like a complete fucking loser before it finally dawned on me she wasn't going to show. Turned out that the trip to Glenn's Diner was the last time I ever saw her. While the Chinese heats up, I check on Stan, who still got a pile of wilted vegetables and a few live crickets from this morning. I lift the corner from his terrarium and he blinks up at me from his rock. Stan's pretty chill and low maintenance, which is the only reason he's managed to stay alive in this house for 8 years. What's up, Stan? I put him on my shoulder, grab my food, and flop onto an armchair across from my comatose father. He's a baseball game on, which I turn off. A, I hate baseball, and B, it reminds me of Cooper Clay, which reminds me of Simon Keller in the whole sex scene in Detention. I never liked the kid, but that was horrible, and Cooper was almost as useless as the blonde girl when you come right down to it. Bronwyn was the only one who did anything except babble like an idiot. My mother used to like Bronwyn. She'd always notice her at school things, like the nativity play in 4th grade when I was a shepherd and Bronwyn was the Virgin Mary. Someone stole baby Jesus before we were supposed to go on, probably to mess with Bronwyn because she took everything way too seriously, even then. Bronwyn went into the audience, borrowed a bag, wrapped a blanket around it, and carried it around as if nothing had happened. That girl doesn't take crap from anyone, my mother had said approvingly. Okay, in the interests of full disclosure, I stole baby Jesus, and it was definitely to mess with Bronwyn. It would have been funnier if she'd freaked out. My jacket beeps and I dig in my pockets for the right phone. I almost laughed in detention on Monday when Bronwyn said nobody has 2 cell phones. I have 3, one for people I know, one for suppliers, and one for customers, plus extras so I can switch them out, but I wouldn't be stupid enough to take any of them into Avery's class. My work phones are always set to vibrate, so I know it's a personal message. I pull out my ancient iPhone and see a text from Amber, a girl I met at a party last month. You up? I hesitate. Amber's hot and never tries to hang out too long, but she was just here a few nights ago. Things get messy when I let casual hookups happen more than once a week, but I'm restless and it could use a distraction. Come over, I write. I'm about to put my phone away when another text comes through. It's from Chad Posner, a guy at Bayview I hang out with sometimes. You see this? I click on the link as in the message, and it opens a Tumblr page with the headline about this. I got the idea for killing Simon while watching Dateline. I'd been thinking about it for a while, obviously. That's not the kind of thing you pluck out of thin air. But the how of getting away with it always stopped me. I don't kid myself that I'm a criminal mastermind, and I'm much too good looking for prison. On the show, a guy killed his wife. Standard Dateline, right? It's always the husband, but turns out lots of people were happy to see her gone. She'd gotten a coworker fired, screwed people over on the city council, and had an affair with a friend's husband. She was a nightmare, basically. The guy on Dateline wasn't too bright. Hired someone to murder his wife, and the cell phone records were easy to trace. But before those came out, he had a decent smokescreen because all of the other suspects. That's the kind of person you can get away with killing, someone everybody else wants dead. Let's face it, everyone at Bayview High hated Simon. I was just the one with enough guts to do something about it. You're welcome. The phone almost slips out of my hand. Another text from Chad Posner came through while I was reading. People are fucked up, I text back. Where'd you get this? Posner writes. Some rando emailed the link with the laughing so hard I'm crying emoji. He thinks it's somebody's idea of a sick joke, which is what most people would think if they hadn't spent an hour with the police officer asking 10 different ways how peanut oil gets in a Simon Colors cup, along with 3 other people who look guilty as hell. None of them have as much experience as I do keeping a straight face when shit's falling apart around them. At least none of them are as good at it as me. Chapter 4 goes back to a bit of Addie and Nate's life and just how Addie has kind of like had this mother who's had really young boyfriends, and her mother just kind of really prioritizes her like idealism or old-fashioned idealism of Addie's gender, being a female, and how she needs to make sure she's like pleasing her boyfriend, and this whole like sex thing with her boyfriend just seems like it's really not something that she wants to do, but her mother has made it seem like something she needs to do to keep her boyfriend happy. And I just feel that this shows a lot how people's parents can kind of like have these really sad and just like harsh and unnecessary like expectations or kind of like ideas and suggestions to their kids. That's really just like unhealthy, and for Addie it's made her really like obsessed with keeping herself like perfectly looking, but her self-esteem is just like very low because she's always insecure that she's not perfect enough. And then for Nate, he's kind of just had like these really absent parents and such, and because of that he's like seen enough of mental illness and addiction, but even then it kind of like pushed him to have to go into this like dealing of drugs and such things like that because it was the only way he was really able to support himself. And so he got this like criminal stereotype set on him, but like it's also an example of just like how many kids don't ask to have to live a life like that, especially so young, but it's really feels like their only option sometimes when it's mostly all they've ever seen, and they feel like they don't have any other option because it gives enough money. And this is just kind of like showing how like drug usage has become a very, very bad and growing problem everywhere in the world. and how many kids' parents take part in it, and it just can really affect the kids. But it just like, you can't meet the child's needs, and it can like cause them to follow the same path. And I think many kids these days are dealing with the same thing. They feel like it's their only option. And yeah, I do feel like Nate will at some point stop though, because now that he's going through all of this with Simon, it's just kind of giving him like a wake-up call, because I feel like he's almost gonna get like caught because the police are on him so much about it. And then I feel that Addie will that her and Jake are probably going to like break up at some point soon, because she's going to get to like a breaking point, and that hopefully she'll go off on her mom.